Walmart just cut ties with Donald Trump's trade policy. The company is the largest private employer in the U.S. with 2.1 million American workers and $648 billion in revenue annually. It operates 4,700 stores throughout 90% of U.S. zip codes and serves 150 million Americans each week. It publicly said that the trade war is unsustainable as the ordinary business lives of middle-class and working-class Americans. It formally resigned from the White House Trade Advisory Council and informed investors and consumers that prices for everyday items in nearly every category on its shelves would soon rise by 15 to 25%. Within 2 weeks, Target, Costco, Amazon, Home Depot, Lowe's, Nike, Apple, and the United States Chamber of Commerce all followed. The president is powerless to stop corporate America, the business elite that was meant to be his foundation, the group on whom he based his entire political identity and his alleged natural ally, from openly opposing his trade policies. Because you can insult a foreign prime minister, threaten Canada, threaten Japan, and impose retaliatory tariffs on a country that upsets you, Trump is afraid rather than angry. You cannot threaten Walmart. You can't threaten all of America's big businesses at once. Furthermore, the corporate opposition isn't only opposing his policy. His personal economic empire is being destroyed by it. The number of corporate reservations at Trump hotels has decreased. Partnerships in business are ending. As corporate America distances itself from anything bearing the Trump name, the Trump brand, already soiled abroad by the trade war, is now proving poisoned at home. With the clarity of a man who has witnessed American capitalism for 7 decades, Warren Buffett's observation cuts through the clutter. Walmart's assertion that the trade war cannot continue is not a political statement, it's a mathematical statement. Additionally, the statistics indicate that the tariffs are destroying the U.S. consumer economy. When you learn how the corporate uprising is impacting every American home and why Trump's personal assets are being specifically targeted, you'll realize this isn't just a trade story. It's the moment American business told the president, enough. Subscribe because this fracture changes everything. Here's what Walmart did and why it's unprecedented. Walmart has navigated recessions, financial crises, oil shocks, pandemics, and 6 decades of political upheaval without making a public political break with a sitting president. That's not because Walmart doesn't have political opinions. It's because Walmart's entire business model depends on serving everyone, Republican and Democrat, urban and rural, rich and working class, and taking political sides is commercially dangerous for a company whose customer base is the entire American middle. For Walmart to cross this line, to publicly and formally break with the administration's trade policy, tells you exactly how catastrophic the economic damage has become. Silence was no longer more expensive than speaking. Speaking was now the safer option. And that calculation, made by one of the most sophisticated corporate risk assessment operations in the world, is itself the most damning verdict on the trade war that any institution could deliver. The CEO's public statement was measured in language and devastating in substance. Our obligation is to our customers and our associates. Trade policies that raise prices on everyday goods harm the families who depend on us. We can no longer participate in advisory structures while those policies remain in effect. Walmart formally withdrew from the White House Corporate Trade Advisory Council, a body the administration had used to project the appearance of business support. Walmart canceled all corporate engagement with administration trade events, photo opportunities, and policy consultations. And then Walmart issued the announcement that landed like a bomb in the American consumer economy: formal investor guidance. Tariff-driven cost increases would result in consumer price increases of 15 to 25% across key merchandise categories: groceries, produce affected by Canadian and Mexican tariffs, processed foods with imported ingredients, beverages, dairy products with tariffed packaging,
materials, electronics components sourced from Asia,
Assembled products, everything from headphones to televisions to small kitchen appliances. Clothing manufactured primarily in Southeast Asia, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and China. All tariffs are exposed. Home goods, toys, auto parts, building supplies, cleaning products, personal care items, household consumables. The math is simple and the math is merciless. Walmart operates on a gross margin of approximately 24%. When tariffs of 25 to 50% are imposed on imported goods, that margin cannot absorb the cost. The difference between what Walmart pays for a product and what it charges for that product is not wide enough to swallow a 25 to 50% increase in acquisition cost. The increase must be passed to the consumer. There is no alternative. There is no trick. There is no executive genius that makes math work differently. Sam Walton built this company on a single promise: the lowest price every day for the American family filling a shopping cart. That promise is why 150 million Americans walk into a Walmart every week. It is the reason Walmart exists. And now Walmart's CEO is publicly saying we cannot keep that promise anymore because of tariffs. For a family of 4 that spends $200 a week at Walmart, a conservative estimate for a household buying groceries, household supplies, and basic necessities, a 15 to 25% price increase means $30 to $50 more per week. That's $1,500 to $2,500 more per year for a family that was already budgeting down to the dollar, already choosing between fresh produce and frozen, already checking the unit price on every item. These are not wealthy families absorbing a rounding error. These are families for whom $2,000 a year is the difference between making rent and not making rent, between keeping the car insured and letting the policy lapse, between a child's school supplies and a conversation about what they can't afford this month. The tariff followed 150 million Americans to the checkout counter, and Walmart told them exactly who sent it. Simultaneously, Walmart announced the acceleration of its supply chain diversification away from tariff-exposed sourcing routes. New partnerships with Canadian manufacturers, the irony of which should not be lost on anyone. The country Trump is tariffing is the country Walmart is turning to for cheaper goods, because Canadian trade agreements with the EU and Asia Pacific provide tariff-free pathways that American routes no longer offer. New sourcing relationships with European suppliers through existing trade frameworks, expanded orders to factories in Vietnam, India, Mexico, and Indonesia, countries that were not competitive with Chinese manufacturing for Walmart-scale orders before the tariffs, but are now receiving them because the tariffs reprice the entire global supply chain map. And here is the detail that demolishes the administration's core argument. American manufacturers who had benefited from early American pressure after the tariffs were first imposed are now losing Walmart orders to international suppliers who can offer tariff-free pricing through Canada's CETA agreement with Europe and the CPTP trade pact with Asia Pacific. The tariffs were supposed to bring manufacturing back to America. Instead, they are sending Walmart's orders to Canada, Vietnam, India, and Mexico. Because Walmart's obligation is not to a trade policy. Walmart's obligation is to the lowest possible price for the family filling a shopping cart. And right now, that obligation points away from the United States. Walmart's political apparatus completed the severance. The company's PAC suspended contributions to candidates who vocally championed tariff expansion. Board members made public statements about trade policy damage that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. Walmart's government affairs team, one of the most influential corporate lobbying operations in Washington, shifted from cooperative engagement with the administration to adversarial lobbying against tariff expansion, working alongside other major retailers and the Chamber of Commerce to build a congressional coalition against the tariff regime. Walmart went from the administration's most valuable corporate ally to its most dangerous corporate opponent. It did so publicly with full knowledge of the political consequences because the economic consequences of staying silent had become worse. The cascade was immediate because the cascade was inevitable. Once the largest retailer in America publicly broke with the trade war, every other major corporation faced the same calculation Walmart had already made. Is it safer to stay silent and absorb the damage, or to speak publicly and warn our customers and shareholders? One by one, the answer came back the same. Target followed within 48 hours. Similar price increase warnings, formal withdrawal from trade advisory participation, a public statement from the CEO that landed with corporate precision. Our guests are already feeling the impact. We will not pretend otherwise. Costco followed within 72 hours. The CEO's letter went directly to 130 million Costco cardholders, the most direct retailer-to-consumer communication channel in American commerce, warning of price increases and explaining with unusual candor that we will absorb what we can, but the math is the math. Amazon filed formal SEC documentation within a week identifying tariffs as a material risk to business operations, projecting consumer price impacts across the Amazon marketplace, and announcing accelerated sourcing from non-tariff markets through Amazon's global logistics infrastructure, the most sophisticated supply chain redirection capability on Earth, now aimed directly at routing around American tariffs. Home Depot and Lowe's issued a joint industry statement on building materials cost increases, projecting 20 to 30% price hikes on tariff-affected categories. Lumber, already elevated by Canadian tariffs, is now compounded by hardware, tools, appliances, fixtures, and fasteners with tariff components. If you're renovating a kitchen, the tariff just added $5,000 to $8,000 to the project. If you're building a deck, add 30%. If you're replacing appliances, add 15 to 20%. And none of that money goes to an American worker. It goes to the U.S. Treasury as a tariff payment that is then spent on other government priorities while the family that paid it eats a smaller dinner. Nike CEO issued a statement that stripped the tariff debate to its core. We manufacture globally to serve consumers globally. Tariffs do not bring jobs home. They raise the price of the shoes American families buy for their children. Apple warned that if tariffs expanded further to cover additional categories of electronic components, device prices would increase by amounts that would put Apple products further out of reach for the working and middle-class consumers the company had spent years trying to serve through lower-cost product lines. And then the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the single most powerful business lobbying organization in the United States, representing over 3 million businesses, an institution that has supported Republican trade policy for more than a century, formally and publicly broke with the administration's tariff regime. The Chamber launched a public campaign against tariff expansion and issued a statement that its president called the most difficult in the organization's modern history. Current trade policy is causing measurable, documented harm to American businesses, American workers, and American families. We can no longer support a policy direction that contradicts the economic interests of our members. $3 trillion in combined corporate revenue, 8 million American employees, hundreds of millions of American customers. This is not a political opposition movement. This is not liberal elites or coastal media or foreign adversaries. This is the American economy. The companies that employ the voters, stock the shelves, deliver the packages, build the houses, and sell the products. Collectively telling the president that his trade policy is economically unsustainable. And when the economy talks, it doesn't tweet, it prices. Trump's response revealed something the country had not seen before in this trade war: genuine panic. Previous trade confrontations had produced rage at Canada, threats against Japan, insults at European leaders. Rage is offensive. Rage projects power. This was different. This was defensive, because for the first time, Trump faced an opponent he could not frame as a foreign enemy. You can call Canada disloyal, you can call Japan ungrateful,
You can threaten tariffs on a country that defies you and rally your base against a foreign adversary. You cannot do any of that to Walmart. Walmart employs 2.1 million Americans. Walmart serves 150 million shoppers every week. Walmart is located in the small towns and suburban communities that voted for Trump, that cheered the tariffs, that believed the trade war would make their lives better. Attacking Walmart is attacking his own voters' employer, their grocery store, the place where they buy their children's school supplies and their household necessities. He cannot call Walmart disloyal without calling Middle America disloyal. The opponent is inside the coalition, and there is no weapon in the presidential arsenal designed for this fight. He tried anyway. Truth Social erupted. These corporations are being very unfair. They should be supporting America, not complaining about trade policies that are making America great. Walmart has made billions in this country, and now they're whining. His surrogates attempted to reframe the price increases as corporate greed. Companies use tariffs as a convenient excuse to raise prices and pad their profits. Walmart's investor filings, publicly available and meticulously documented down to the penny, demolished that argument in real time. The company's margins were declining, not expanding. The price increases were cost pass-throughs, not profit grabs, and the financial data proved it to anyone willing to read an earnings report. Industry analysts on every financial news network confirmed the same reality. Walmart was not profiteering. Walmart was surviving. He threatened vaguely to look very strongly at companies that raise prices, a threat with no policy mechanism, no legal authority, and no precedent in American governance. The President of the United States cannot order a private company to sell products below cost, and every constitutional scholar and business law expert in Washington confirmed this within hours. The threat was empty, and everyone knew it was empty, including the people it was aimed at. His aides reportedly urged Trump to call Walmart's CEO directly to negotiate a public softening of the company's position, to find some face-saving language that would allow both sides to appear cooperative while quietly diffusing the confrontation. Walmart declined the call, not through a spokesperson, not through a scheduling conflict, declined. The largest retailer in the United States of America would not take a phone call from the President of the United States because there was nothing to discuss. The math was the math, and no phone call changed arithmetic. Trade surrogates were deployed to the Sunday morning news programs to argue that the price increases were temporary and would resolve once domestic manufacturing ramped up to replace imported goods. An argument that required believing American factories could replace the combined manufacturing output of China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Mexico, and a dozen other countries within months. A timeline that no manufacturing expert, no supply chain professional, and no economist of any political persuasion considered remotely plausible. Walmart's response, issued through a spokesperson with the precision of a company that had wargamed every possible administration counterargument before going public, was 5 words that ended the debate permanently. We deal in current prices. Every response failed because every response was designed for a different kind of opponent. Trump's playbook, insult, threaten, escalate, rally the base against the enemy, works against foreign governments and politicians who operate in the same arena of public opinion and political pressure. It does not work against a corporation whose sole obligation is the price on the shelf and whose sole constituency is the customer standing in the aisle, comparing 2 products and reaching for the cheaper one. Governments negotiate under political pressure. Corporations respond to math, and the math has spoken. The corporate cascade became self-reinforcing in a way that no presidential intervention could stop. Once, when Walmart broke, staying silent became a liability for every other major corporation. Not merely a political liability, but a legal one. Shareholders demanded the same transparency that Walmart had provided. Institutional investors sent formal letters to boards asking why material tariff risks had not been disclosed. Customers asked why their retailer was still pretending prices weren't rising when Walmart had already admitted the truth. Employees questioned why their company was still participating in trade advisory structures that legitimized the very policies destroying their own purchasing power and their own household budgets. Securities lawyers advised boards that failing to disclose tariff-related material risks after Walmart had established the disclosure precedent could expose the company to shareholder lawsuits for inadequate risk communication. Each new corporate break gave political, legal, and reputational cover to the next. Congressional Republicans from districts anchored by Walmart distribution centers, Target stores, Costco warehouses, and Home Depot locations began publicly distancing themselves from the tariff policy because their own constituents' employers were telling them on the record, in SEC filings, in investor calls broadcast to the world, that the policy was destroying their businesses. The president built his entire political brand on being pro-business. Business just told him unanimously and publicly and in legally binding financial disclosures that he is anti-business, and he had no answer because the only honest answer would require admitting that the tariffs are hurting the American economy. And admitting that would mean admitting that the core premise of the entire trade war, that tariffs protect American workers and strengthen American industry, was wrong from the beginning. And then the corporate pressure landed on Trump's personal empire. Major corporations had historically held events, conferences, retreats, and client dinners at Trump-branded properties. Corporate travel departments had booked rooms at Trump hotels for executive travel. Companies seeking proximity to presidential power had patronized Trump venues as a form of commercial diplomacy. That era ended the week Walmart broke. Corporate travel policies across the Fortune 500 were updated to exclude Trump-branded properties. Companies that had publicly opposed the trade war could not be seen enriching the Trump Organization simultaneously. The optics were impossible, the reputational risk was unacceptable, and the internal pressure from employees and shareholders was immediate. Conference and event bookings at Trump properties collapsed as corporate event planners redirected to competitors. The Four Seasons, the Ritz-Carlton, the Marriott, luxury brands that offered comparable hospitality without the political baggage. Companies that used to compete for booking space at Trump International now wouldn't return the phone calls. That wasn't politics, that was a brand risk calculation made by procurement departments following standard corporate reputational due diligence. Business partnerships connected to Trump properties began to sever across every commercial category that luxury hospitality depends on. Sponsorship deals were terminated, marketing relationships dissolved, vendor agreements were allowed to lapse. The entire commercial ecosystem surrounding luxury hospitality properties, the web of corporate relationships that generates the conferences, the events, the partnerships, the co-branding opportunities that keep a luxury brand profitable, began systematically avoiding the Trump name. Golf tournaments that had been held at Trump courses for years moved to other venues, citing scheduling conflicts that everyone understood were reputational calculations. Industry conferences relocated to competing properties without public explanation because no public explanation was needed. Corporate retreats were rebooked at resorts whose brands didn't come with political controversy attached. The vendor community that services luxury hospitality, caterers, event production companies, florists, audiovisual providers, transportation services, entertainment agencies reported the same pattern across the board. Bookings at Trump properties were declining steadily. The decline was accelerating after the Walmart break, and nobody in the corporate world wanted their company's name, their logo, their brand associated with a property whose owner's trade war had just triggered the largest corporate revolt in modern American history. Mar-a-Lago membership, historically the crown jewel of Trump's domestic business empire, came under institutional pressure that struck at the very foundation of the club's commercial model. The $200,000-plus initiation fee and five-figure annual dues had always been justified by one thing: access, proximity to the president. Networking with CEOs, hedge fund managers, lobbyists, and political power brokers who gathered at the club specifically because the president was there and business could be done over dinner in an environment that mixed social prestige with political influence. That value proposition, pay for access, pay for proximity, pay for the prestige of belonging to the most exclusive club in American political life, depended entirely on the Trump brand being commercially desirable. The corporate revolt destroyed that equation. Corporate board members who held personal Mar-a-Lago memberships began facing pointed questions from their own boards of directors. Is this company comfortable with a senior executive paying $200,000 to a club owned by the president, whose trade policies are measurably damaging the company's bottom line? Is this membership a personal expense, or is it being treated as a business networking cost? And if so, does it represent a conflict of interest during an active trade dispute? Shareholder advocacy groups flagged Mar-a-Lago memberships in proxy statements and shareholder communications as potential governance concerns. Corporate compliance departments at major companies issued internal guidance advising executives to evaluate whether personal associations with Trump-branded properties created reputational risk for the company. New membership applications slowed dramatically as the corporate revolt made association with the Trump brand commercially dangerous rather than commercially advantageous. A CEO photographed at Mar-a-Lago the week after Walmart publicly broke with the trade war would face questions from shareholders, reporters, and employees that no amount of networking value could justify. The waiting list used to be exclusive because everyone wanted in. Now, the atmosphere was shifting because people were finding reasons to get out. Quietly letting memberships lapse, declining renewal invitations, and avoiding the club during periods of intense media scrutiny, which, given the pace of the trade war, meant avoiding it most of the time. The international brand damage documented in previous months, licensing deals under pressure in Turkey, Philippines, India, and Indonesia, hotel tourism declined as Canadian and European travelers avoided the United States, golf courses in Scotland and Ireland losing tournament contracts and international memberships, was now compounded by domestic brand damage that was in many ways more devastating because it struck at the core of the Trump organization's home market. International damage could be attributed to foreign political sentiment. Domestic damage could only be attributed to the American business community's own assessment of the brand's commercial value. And that assessment, rendered through corporate travel policies and event bookings and partnership terminations and membership decisions, was unanimous. The Trump brand had become a liability. International tourists had stopped coming because of the trade war's diplomatic fallout. Now, American corporations had stopped coming because of the trade war's domestic corporate revolt. The Trump brand was losing both sides of its customer base simultaneously, international and domestic, foreign tourists and American business travelers, overseas licensing partners, and Fortune 500 event planners. With no replacement market in sight and no path back to commercial viability that did not require the trade war to end. Warren Buffett addressed the corporate rebellion with the philosophical weight of a man who has watched American capitalism
Operate for 70 years and was now watching it do something he had never seen it do before. When Walmart, a company that has navigated every recession, every financial crisis, every political upheaval for 60 years without making a public political break with a sitting president, says the trade war is unsustainable, you do not dismiss that, Buffett said. You do not call it politics, you do not call it corporate greed. You listen because Walmart doesn't make political statements. Walmart makes math statements. And the math says the tariffs are destroying the American consumer economy.
He connected the corporate revolt to Berkshire's own consumer-facing operations with the specificity of a man who reads the daily sales reports from his own companies. I own businesses that sell to the same Americans who shop at Walmart, Dairy Queen, See's Candies, Nebraska Furniture Mart, Pilot Flying J Truck Stops, BNSF Railroad, which moves the goods that stock the shelves. When Walmart says prices are going up 15 to 25% on everyday goods, I know exactly what that means for my businesses because I can see it in real time. It means demand goes down. A family facing a higher grocery bill, a higher electric bill, a higher gas bill because fuel costs are rising with the trade disruption. That family does not buy ice cream. They do not buy chocolates. They do not buy a new couch or replace the living room carpet. They cut everywhere they can because the necessities are consuming a larger share of a paycheck that hasn't grown. The tariff doesn't just hit the tariffed product, it hits every discretionary purchase in the household budget, every restaurant meal that gets skipped, every family outing that gets canceled, every birthday present that gets downsized. The family has a fixed amount of money. When necessities cost more, everything else gets cut. The ripple goes everywhere, and I can see it arriving at my own business's cash registers. On the scale of the corporate rebellion, Buffett was unusually direct. In my entire career, and I have been watching American business for 70 years, I have never seen the corporate establishment break with a president this publicly, this rapidly, and this unanimously. This is not a policy disagreement where some companies support the president and others don't. This is a near total repudiation of trade policy by the institutions that run the American consumer economy. When corporations stop worrying about offending the White House and start worrying about surviving the trade war, the situation is past the point where political management can fix it. The first rule of any coalition is to keep it together. The corporate coalition just walked out the door, and they took their checkbooks with them. On the damage to Trump's personal empire, Buffett applied the same diagnostic precision he brings to any investment analysis. Corporate America used to hold events at Trump properties. Now, corporate America won't return the calls. That isn't a political boycott. Political boycotts are organized and intentional. This is a credit risk assessment. Companies do not associate their brand with brands that are losing value. The Trump brand has been losing value internationally for months because the trade war alienated foreign customers. Now it's losing value domestically because the trade war alienated American corporate customers. When you lose both your international and your domestic customer base simultaneously, you don't have a business challenge, you have a business crisis, he added. And Berkshire prepared for this kind of dislocation. We diversified. We built cash reserves. The Trump Organization doubled down on a brand that its owner is actively depreciating through his own presidential decisions. The contrast is not political, it is financial, and the financial outcome is predictable. So here's what happened. Walmart, the largest private employer in the United States, the retailer that serves 150 million Americans every week, the company that is middle-class commercial life in this country, publicly cut ties with the trade war. Within 2 weeks, Target, Costco, Amazon, Home Depot, Lowe's, Nike, and the United States Chamber of Commerce followed with $3 trillion in combined corporate revenue, 8 million American employees, the backbone of the American consumer economy.
An open, public, documented revolt against the president's trade policy. Consumer prices surging 15 to 25% on everyday goods, $1,500 more per year for a family of 4 that was already struggling to keep up. Trump panicked because for the first time in this entire trade war, he faced an opponent he could not insult, could not threaten, could not tariff, and could not replace because the opponent was his own coalition, his own base's employers, the very businesses he built his political identity on championing. The corporate rebellion destroyed Trump's domestic business base. Corporate bookings at Trump properties evaporated as Fortune 500 travel policies excluded the brand.
Business partnerships severed as the commercial ecosystem distanced itself from anything with his name on it. The Trump brand becoming toxic at home after already becoming toxic abroad. And Mar-a-Lago memberships coming under board-level scrutiny as corporate executives weighed whether association with the Trump name had become a professional liability that no amount of presidential access could justify. Buffett called it the most unanimous corporate repudiation of a sitting president he has witnessed in 7 decades of watching American capitalism, and warned that the damage radiates outward from every tariffed product into every discretionary purchase in every household budget in America. The corporate rebellion has no off switch. This is the point that matters most, and the point that the White House has not publicly acknowledged. Walmart cannot unwarn about price increases. The investor guidance is filed with the SEC. The disclosure is permanent. The numbers are in the public record and will be cited in every earnings call and analyst report for quarters to come. Target cannot unwithdraw from the Trade Advisory Council. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce cannot unbreak with the administration after issuing its most critical statement in over a century of existence. These are institutional decisions made by boards of directors with fiduciary obligations to shareholders, documented and legally binding filings and investor communications that become part of the permanent corporate record. They do not reverse because of a presidential phone call. They do not soften because of a social media threat. The corporations have calculated the math, disclosed the math publicly, and repositioned their supply chains and their political relationships around the math. Walking it back would require contradicting their own SEC filings, misleading their own shareholders, and reversing supply chain decisions that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to execute. It is not happening. The prices are going up. The corporations have spoken. The supply chains are being redirected, and the president's own business empire is paying the price of the corporate distancing, alongside every American family paying more at the register. Walmart told America the truth about the trade war. The truth costs 15 to 25% more on everything you buy. Trump panicked because there is no tariff for honesty, no executive order that lowers a price on a Walmart shelf, and no tweet that makes corporate America unsee the math. The biggest company in America looked at the trade war and said, enough. And when Walmart says enough, enough is enough.